Welcome to another great O'Reilly webcast. My name is Yasmina Greco. I am with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's event. Today, folks, we have Theresa Neal with us, and she is going to talk to you about rethinking mobile tutorials, which patterns really work. Theresa has been designing user interfaces since 2001 when she coded her first seat map for an airline kiosk. She loved the direct interaction of tapping a seat to change rows and updating the colors to show the seat was assigned. She wanted to make more products like this, intuitive, direct, and interactive. In the past 11 years, she has led the design for more than 100 web, desktop, and mobile applications, working first as the usability lead at Sabre Airline Solutions, then on her own as a user experience consultant. Clients include a diverse mix of Fortune 500 companies, nonprofit organizations, and local Austin startups. Her experiences as a UX designer are chronicled at theresaneal.wordpress.com, and her work can be seen at theresaneal.com. Folks, Theresa is also the author of numerous books, including the best-selling O'Reilly Media book, Mobile Design Pattern Gallery, 2nd edition, and we're very excited to have Theresa with us today to present this webcast for you all. As we get the event started, I would like to go over a little housekeeping to help you get the most out of today's webcast. First, you'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Theresa. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Theresa, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for her and we can make sure we see it for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you would like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you might need to give it permission to access your account. The Twitter widget will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweet so you don't have to. And today, folks, our hashtag is mobile design, all one word. If you have any trouble with the webcast, please take a look at your help widget. If you continue to have trouble, just post it in the group chat and one of our staff will help you right away. If you have any choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is to close any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast, and we will have the archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Theresa for her presentation. Hello, Theresa.
Hi, thank you, Yaz. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to talk about rethinking mobile tutorials, which patterns really work. This information I'm sharing today comes directly from the 2nd edition of the Mobile Design Pattern Gallery. I believe it is Chapter 7. And I've also included some newer examples since the release of the book. And I also wanted to give a little bit of background of why I started rethinking mobile tutorials to begin with. So let's move on here. So in 2012, I released the 1st edition of the Mobile Design Pattern Gallery. It had 10 chapters, and each chapter was dedicated to a specific type of pattern. And there were probably about 70, 80 patterns across the whole book. In the 1st edition of the book, Chapter 7 was dedicated to invitations. Basically, how do we use design patterns to drive deeper engagement with our applications? And in the original edition of the book, I had a number of different patterns. I think there was 8, including dialogue, tips, tour, video demo, transparency, first time through, persistent, and discoverable patterns for invitations. I was pretty proud of these. We collected screenshots for all of these different examples and had prepared information explaining how each of the patterns could work. Then moving ahead, after the book was published, I received lots of invitations from different companies to come and speak with their teams about mobile design. This is one of the best parts of being an author for O'Reilly, is getting all these invitations and getting to work with other companies. So I was invited to go speak at Intuit, and following my talk about mobile patterns, there was another talk by Lisa Griggs, and her presentation was about inspiring confidence. So she's a lead designer at Intuit, and she led the design for the Snap payroll product. And what she shared during her talk kind of blew me away. So she was talking about, well, how do we design an application that inspires confidence with our users? And what she started showing was the designs that they had used for creating invitations in the Snap payroll product. And what she showed was all of these different variations of all of the different patterns that I had outlined in my book. There were the first design that they tried was to simply have a dialogue when you come into the Snap payroll application. And the dialogue would tell the user, these are the things that are available that you can do. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, when they did their user testing, that didn't test very well. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe a dialogue's not going to work. Why don't we try a tour? So they created a tour, and the tour was like, these are the things you can do in Snap payroll. This is how it works, 1, 2, 3, 4. They tested that. It didn't work. Next, they tried a different type of tour. So they're like, okay, well, we'll make it more explicit, and we'll use a little paging indicator, and we can show this is what happens in step 1, and this is what's going to happen in step 2. This also did not work well in usability testing. As I'm watching Elisa give this presentation, I'm kind of cringing on the inside because I'm realizing that in my book where I've outlined all these patterns, they're simply the patterns were pulled from common practice. And at the time, we didn't have any usability testing information to inform which patterns were better than other patterns. So this is really one of my first takes on, do all of these patterns that we've outlined really work? Should we be using these patterns in our application? So Elisa keeps going, and she shows that they try out the transparency pattern. This is one that's very popular. I see it all over the mobile patterns and pattern sites. Sometimes it's called Coach Tips, sometimes it's called transparency. They tried that. It didn't work in testing. Then they tried this variation of a really cute transparency with a little robot that pointed to different pieces of the screen. Still, this was not working for their users. They even moved on to create a first-time through experience with these different techniques. One of them is using a transparency, and one of them is using a tip right on the screen. At this point, like I said, I'm starting to cringe because she has basically tried out in user testing all of the different variations that I've outlined in the book, or almost all of the variations that I've outlined in the book. And none of them are passing user testing. So moving forward, we're going to jump ahead a couple of years where I'm working as a designer at RetailMeNot. And I'm engaged to help them create the first-time user experience or the onboarding flow tutorial for the RetailMeNot application. So what they were hoping for was to drive, again, deeper user engagement with their application. So I had a little bit of knowledge from those Intuit examples of what's not going to work. However, the product teams were still interested in trying out these different patterns for invitations because they're so widely used across other applications. How could they be wrong? So we tried them out. We tried a video demo. We tried a tour. We tried transparencies, different variations of transparencies. And here's another example of a different transparency. And again, all of these through user testing simply frustrated our users. People were getting very aggravated. In fact, the quote that I recall is, just let me get to the app. I don't want to see all of this. All of this is getting in my way. Let me get into the application. So at that point, I was realizing that something's wrong. We're having pattern failure. These patterns that are so commonly used are not effective for design. And you can see here that I've actually put a little red X on each of the type of patterns that I originally highlighted that failed. So the dialogue does not work. The tour is not working. The video demo is not working. The transparency is not working. Well, patterns, and here's some more examples from the patterns.com site. If patterns can't guide us for creating tutorials, what can? What should we turn to when we're designing tutorials for our applications? And this is where I was realizing that common practice is not best practice. And at that point, I decided to turn to game design. And as I was looking through publications about game design, I found a really great tutorial by a company called Extra Credits. And the tutorial is called, coincidentally, Tutorials 101. And what it does is it gives us some basic guidelines to follow for creating tutorials. Now, granted, they're looking at it from a game perspective, but we can use these principles to create really fantastic tutorials for our mobile applications. All right, so rule number 1 for crafting your tutorial is use less text. And I want to look at an example here from an Android app called Boomerang. Boomerang has 8 pages of text with some screenshots that precedes you getting into the application, starting to use it. It's incredibly text heavy. And so we want to follow the guideline of show, don't tell. And just by adding a screenshot to your tutorial, that's still not showing. We want to show and have people do. So I'd like to contrast the Boomerang app that we're looking at here, of which I've not even showed all the screenshots. This is just 4 of the 8 pages in the tutorial, with an application like Mailbox. So Mailbox has been out for a couple of years, and probably most people have had an opportunity to try it out. I can't embed video in this demo I'm showing you today, but there is a link out on YouTube if you're not familiar with the Mailbox app. When you download and install Mailbox and open it for the first time, it has an interactive tutorial, meaning it shows you how to use the application, but it actually makes you follow the directions and use the gestures they're recommending to proceed through the tutorial. So in this example here, it doesn't just tell you to swipe right to archive a message. It actually shows you that you should swipe right, and then it has you put your thumb on the app and swipe right and actually take that action. So you're learning by doing. And then once you've swiped right and archived a message, it tells you, hey, great job. Let's move to the next step. So that type of interactivity in the tutorial is exactly what we're aiming for. Here's another example from a product called Digical. So Digical, again, it has pictures of what you should do, accompanied by a lot of text, but they can learn from a nice iOS application out there called Fantastical, which actually has you perform the action. So again, very much like Mailbox. Your first time in the application, it welcomes you, it shows you the calendar, and it tells you what gestures you should perform in order to get the most out of the application. So tap and drag, swipe, pull down, and it actually has you perform each of these gestures until you get comfortable with it. At that point, Fantastical has given you the tools to be successful with their application. Rule number 2, no front loading. This one goes hand in hand with, keep the amount of text down. And this is an example from an app called Do, D-O-O, I believe. So it has 11 pages of instructions before you get into the application. So when you front load your tutorial, it overwhelms users and under-engages them. So we want to provide information in short, easily digestible chunks. A good example of that is another to-do app called To-Do List. And it's really simple. When you open up the app, there isn't even a tutorial on the screen. Nothing prevents you from going directly into the application. And once you get into the application, there are contextual tips showing you where to start. So on this middle screen here, you can see there's a little red label that shows you where you are going to hit the plus sign in order to add your first task. Then once you've added a task, you get another tip. So it's very much a guided experience. There's no front loading at all involved in this application. One of the things that makes it challenging to design a guided experience is that you have to create the design based on a common workflow. So if you haven't designed your app based on common workflows, it's really hard to create a great guided experience. You got to go back to the drawing board and find out what tasks or flows are people going to do most often, and make sure that you are providing them these tips in the context of that flow. Rule number 3 is make it fun. So again, we are taking these principles from from Extra Credits, the Tutorial 101, who's telling us how to do tutorials for games. And you might think, well, I'm building an enterprise app, or I'm building a B2B tool. It's really not my job to make it fun. And that's okay. However, there are some consumer-facing applications that fun is a really nice element to add to it. So here's an example from, I believe it's MSNBC, where they're using the transparency pattern and kind of this handwritten font to show all of the instructions. So this is also an anti-pattern for, use less text and don't front load. But handwritten fonts on a transparency, it's not fun. It's just still a lot of words to read. It's a lot to process before you can get into the application, and this is just 4 of the 5 or 6 pages in their tutorial. If we look at this next example, and my system is giving me a little bit of an error as it hangs up here. Okay, in this next example, this is from Flipboard last year on Android. And I don't believe the current application has this anymore, but if you're interested in seeing it, there is a video out on YouTube. So when you came to Flipboard or installed Flipboard for the first time and opened the application, the screen at the very bottom edge would actually flip open. So without any gestures or interaction from the user, it would flip open a little bit and show you, peeking out beneath, as you can see in this middle screen, the options to get started or sign in. And then the Flipboard would fall back down, and then it would flip open again, giving you that little peek. And what it was doing in a very playful way was letting you know, hey, there's something down here. And if you swipe on it, you can get into the next set of options, the get started and sign in. And not only was that playful and kind of fun, it was also teaching users how they were going to be navigating the application once they started using it, because Flipboard's all about the flip, all about the swipe. And so it was teasing you, letting you see a little glimpse of what lies ahead, and also training you. All right, and I'm going to pause for just a second because we had a really good question come in that I would like to address. So I have a question here that says, I work for clients who routinely say things like, if you need a tutorial, your interface has failed. And so when do you draw the line at complexity and functionality and ease of use? So yes, I have heard that from clients as well, and it totally depends on the application that you're making. If you're designing a super simple app like I don't know, maybe say a very simple social networking app like just taking and sharing pictures, maybe something like Instagram, versus designing a B2B tool or an enterprise application or a productivity tool, we can't expect that we can design our mobile applications so intuitively that everybody will be able to figure out everything as soon as they land on the home screen. So it is a good point that you may not need a full-fledged tutorial for your application. So if we were to go back and look at that example to-do list, there was no front-loaded tutorial for their application. You basically would download the app, you would sign in, and then the contextual tips guided you through the first-time experience. So that's a way, if you're talking with a manager or a product owner and they're saying, we don't need a tutorial, it should be so intuitive, maybe that's what they're talking about. We don't need a tutorial to interrupt the first-time experience and push somebody to watch a full tour or demo before they start using the app. But that doesn't mean that you can't put contextual tips within your application to drive deeper engagement from your users. So folks, feel free to send more questions like that, and I'll just stop as they come in and answer them as we're going through these slides. So we just looked at the Flipboard example of making it fun or playful, and now we'll look at another example of making it fun. So again, sometimes it's not appropriate for you to make an application that's necessarily fun. However, we should create the tutorial experience and make it rewarding. So you can substitute the word rewarding for fun. And in that case, what you're wanting to do is provide interactivity that enables the user to actually accomplish things. And so this is an example from Vine. And the first time that you use Vine, it actually walks you through the process of creating a video. So in your first time through, the end result is your first Vine video. And that's very rewarding. And so just substitute make it rewarding instead of make it fun. Another example that I heard when I was at Intuit was for their trying to remember what it's called, for one of their applications that allows you to file your taxes online. And I apologize, but I'm spacing on the name of it. But if you have a very simple tax return, you can use a mobile app to file your taxes. And when you're filing your taxes, it's not appropriate for the app to necessarily be fun. You want it to be trustworthy. You want to feel that the calculations are accurate. Because this is about your money, your refund, or the amount that you possibly owe. But they did interject a fun element at the end of it. So when you actually submit your tax form to the IRS, there's a little piece of copy that says, you may let out a spontaneous woohoo right now. And so what they were able to do was use copy to introduce a fun element within the application. All right, moving to the next example and the next rule. Rule number 4 is about reinforcing learning. So rule number 4, reinforcement, it actually takes care of itself if you followed the first 3 rules. So an example of this would be, again, you have, let's take an example from Polar. So Polar is an application that allows you to post a poll and also quickly and easily vote on a bunch of other polls that have been posted. And this is a really, really easy app to use. Once you download it and open it up, you'll see a poll, and I believe like on the left-hand side is one option, on the right-hand side is another option, and you tap on the option you're interested in. So it might say, what do you like more, cats or dogs? And there's a picture of cats on the left and dogs on the right. If you like dogs, you tap on the dog. So it's intuitive. There's no need for a tutorial up front. However, they've done a really great job in designing for deeper engagement by after you've answered a number of polls. So say you've answered 5, 6, 7, 8 polls, you get a little tip. And so this polar bear comes up and says, hey, did you know that if you're not interested in the poll that you're seeing, you can just swipe it off the screen and it'll get rid of it. So it's showing a tip for a more advanced user. Once Polar has determined that you're understanding how to use the application, then it starts introducing more functionality to you, just a little bit at a time. Now, you can contrast that with if they had done a front-loaded tutorial, that would have been like step 2 or 3. It would have said first that you tap on here to vote for a certain thing. Second, after you've done that, then you can swipe ones that you don't like out of the way. And see, that wouldn't have been as effective. But disclosing these tips as the user has mastered an interaction is a great way to encourage deeper engagement. Another example that I'm showing here is from an app called Duolingo that helps you master another language. And they have a far more structured process for providing feedback and reinforcing learning through gamification. So they have a whole system of you're earning points. There's a little trainer who's showing you you're doing a great job. There's a skills tree, that's the picture on the far right-hand side, showing you the things that you've mastered and you have things yet to learn. So I have a lot of clients that ask me to incorporate gamification into their mobile apps. Sometimes it's appropriate, like in this example from Duolingo, where you can do just outright gamification, like you're literally playing a game, earn points, win these things, move on to the next thing. Or sometimes it needs to be a more subtle version of gamification. All right, so we had some more questions come in. I'm going to read through these here. So I have a question coming in from Ronnie, and it says, I'd love to see an example of a tutorial for an enterprise application that uses these principles. So Ronnie, you may be stuck on the one that says make it fun or reinforce through learning. But there are examples of enterprise applications that do a good job of, instead of giving you all of the information and interactions up front in a tutorial, again, they use contextual tips within the workflow to show you how to use the application. So this is in a mobile app example, but if you think about Gmail, which is used for businesses, when Gmail rolls out a new design or when they roll out their new calendar, you will see contextual tips on the screen introducing new features. So there may be a little tip on the left-hand screen saying, we've introduced a new way to do foldering. And in the top right, I think this was like last year when Gmail switched over, maybe 2 years ago when they switched over to their new design. They had to show everybody where they had moved the compose message button and how the compose message window would open in screen instead of in a dialog. And so that's a perfect example of how you can create deeper engagement as well as introduce new features to customers by using some of these tips. The next question that I had come in is a question about accessibility. And the question is application accessibility a fundamental part of these mobile patterns, or does it require a different skill set? I am not sure at what point that plays into mobile, accessibility plays into mobile tutorials. In fact, I may actually defer this question until after this session and post an answer to it on the blog, on my blog. And I'd like you to refer back to that, and I will address that question more there because I'm not sure this is totally pertinent exactly to mobile tutorials right now. So, Dom, I will get back to you on that one. All right, moving on to the next rule. Oh, sorry, one more example from Rule 4, so reinforcing through learning. Another way to apply this rule is to use visual indicators once somebody performs an action. So in this example from the app AnyDo, the first time that I used AnyDo and created a task, when I completed the task, it told me, hey, go ahead and swipe it to mark it as done. And once I swiped the task, it drew a line through it, turned it gray, and moved it down on my task list. In the future, anytime I completed a task, I got that same visual indication. So part of this rule is about consistency and also providing feedback in your application, and that helps reinforce learning. Another thing that AnyDo does well is once you've completed a number of tasks, it actually gives you a reward. And it's not structured in once you've completed 5 tasks or 10 tasks. It's spontaneous. So occasionally I'll just get a little note saying I've done a great job, and they reward me with a couple of points. So the element of surprise is an element of gamification that helps reinforce learning. One more thing that AnyDo does well is they actually have a widget in their Android application that comes up on my home screen every day and prompts me to plan my day. It also shows up anytime I miss a phone call, and it asks me if I would like to take that phone call that came in and add it to my task list as a call that I need to return later. And so this would be another example of something that you can incorporate within an enterprise application, is thinking about how users are using the product and seeing if there are ways within your mobile app that you can make their day easier. So I could imagine in a scheduling application using something like this to prompt people. If you were doing a point-of-sale system, incorporating a widget in addition to the mobile app to help prompt people to come back into the application, say when, I don't know, an item in the inventory was running low. All of these elements could make for a better user experience. All right, rule number 5 is listen to your users. And what the extra credits tutorial suggests is that, or what they propose, is that if you've spent the past 6 months, 12 months, 18 months designing your application, you're probably biased, and it's going to be very hard for you to tell at which point a user may become stuck in your product, right? Because you've been living it and breathing it, designing it, coding it. You no longer are objective as to where somebody might find or might get stuck. So it's very important to do usability testing, not just to improve the usability of your design, but to watch and see where people stumble and see if that's an area where you could introduce something like a contextual tip to help them over something that maybe they aren't understanding. And that brings me to the actual results of both Intuit and RetailMeNot. So what patterns really worked for these two companies? And it turns out that contextual tips are the winner. So in this example on the left-hand side, you'll see that Intuit uses a little sticky note to provide a contextual tip for the first time a user has coming into the Snap Payroll application. They also use this in some of their other mobile apps. And basically it says, hey, let's get you started. This is where you add your first employee. And so this contextual tip on a sticky note is what tested hands down the best for them. It helps people get started at the right time, the right place, and get in there right away and start adding in their employees. What we found with RetailMeNot was that we didn't necessarily need to craft a first-time user experience telling them how to use the application, because it's a fairly simple application. You go into it, and if you're looking for a coupon for Home Depot, you search for Home Depot, or if you are looking for deals within your mall, it can tell that you're in the mall, and it just goes ahead and surfaces deals for you. So it's not a very hard application to learn. However, we wanted to drive more engagement of people saving coupons and favoriting stores, because that keeps bringing them back to the application, and it eventually would result in them creating an account. So we wanted to make sure they were fully utilizing the features in our app. So what we did was we used contextual tips within the deal page to let people know, hey, this little star over here, this is how you save a coupon. And this shows up on every screen until the first time that they save a coupon. And once they've saved a coupon, we know that they've mastered that action, and we no longer prompt them for that. So there are contextual tips all through the RetailMeNot application to drive that deeper engagement. So I'm going to move on to some frequently asked questions that I get from folks about what we've just seen here today. Let's talk about tutorials versus onboarding. So what we've been talking about designing is tutorials. How do you teach people to use your application, or in the case that it's a simple enough app they don't need to be taught how to use it, how do you surface features and functionality to them so that they're fully utilizing your application? That's what we're talking about in a tutorial. So personalizing experience is different than trying to teach someone how to use your app. And the example that I'm showing here is from Beats Music. This is a really good example of registration plus personalization. So if you're interested in learning more about this, take a look in the new version of the book. Chapter 2 covers forms, and it covers registration and personalization, sign in and sign up. So in this example from Beats, on the very first screen, which I'm not showing here, you type in your name. And as soon as you type in your name, it customizes the screen and says, hey, Arthur, or in my case, Theresa, tell us what type of music you like. And then it allows you to tap on the different genres of music you like and a couple of artists. And based on the information that you've given it, it creates a personalized experience. So it creates a playlist for you based on the information you gave it. This design that I've showed for personalization is totally okay, and there's no reason to remove that. This is not a tutorial at all, and so we wouldn't want to apply the rules of no front loading here, because it's very important for Beats to be successful to collect this personalization up front in order to give you that customized list. So don't confuse a tutorial versus this type of personalized onboarding experience. Now, I would like to caution you, when you're creating your onboarding experience, if it spans 11 pages, it might be a little bit too long. So you should probably make sure that you test it, because it is frustrating for folks to have their first experience with your application be gated by all of these screens. So exercise moderation when you are creating a personalized onboarding experience. And you would definitely not want to have this type of experience where you're collecting all of this information followed by 5 more screens of telling somebody how to use the app. You would want to model it like Beats has it, of they've collected the information, they create a personalized experience for you, and the experience they've created is intuitive enough to just dump you into it so you can start using it. Another point of confusion is tutorials versus product tours. So highlighting your value proposition, what your app does for people, is different than trying to teach somebody how to use your app. So in this example from Behance, Behance is showcasing the value of Behance. Now, I don't know if this is totally necessary for them to do in their mobile application. A lot of times this information could be provided on the App Store, or people would have already known the value of Behance before downloading the app. But let's just say there is a compelling business reason to show the value proposition of your product at the beginning of your app. You can go ahead and do that. Again, it's not a tutorial. It's okay if you have a couple of pages talking about the value proposition, but you have to make sure that it can be skipped. So you'll notice in this example from Behance that down in the bottom of the screen, you can skip this. You should not force people to walk through your value proposition. It's very frustrating. One of the best designs of this that I've seen is where the top part of the screen is dedicated to the value proposition. So these different elements of what makes Behance a cool app. And right down below are the sign in and sign up buttons. So for folks who are coming in on the first time, if they already know that they want to be in Behance or they're already a member of it, they can quickly go ahead and sign in or sign up. But for other people who might want a little bit more information, they have that option of looking to see what value Behance provides. I want to show you this next example of how you should not create a product tour. So this is from an application called Reporter. This is highlighted on all of the pattern sites that I've seen recently as a new app that's out there that we should look at and design from, and we should not look at and design from their product tour. If you see what we have here, it's basically 4 steps, and it's very text heavy. The iconography, although interesting, is not helping convey their value proposition, and there's no way to get out of it. As you can see, there's no skip or close button. You actually have to walk through all of these screens and hit done before they'll let you into their application. So we don't want to follow that model. That's very frustrating for folks who are trying to get into and use your app. So here's another question that I've run into is the difference between, let me make sure you guys can see that slide too. Okay. Another example is tutorials versus help. So there are applications, mobile applications, that have help systems, and it's okay. Again, if it's a simple application, it may not need a tutorial, and it certainly won't need a help system. But there are plenty of mobile apps out there that can have a help guide. Facebook has one. Pages has one. This is a really nice example from Flava. Audible has one. There are lots of good examples out there. If you're creating a more complex productivity tool that folks have questions about and need help. This is just like any type of other software or software as a service web application that's out in the market. So just because you have a tutorial or you've created a really great guided experience for your users, it doesn't mean that you can not have help as well. So Flipboard does a pretty good example, or a pretty good case, they do a good job of getting people into their application for the first time, but they also have a very nice help system that you could turn to if you needed additional help. So you can see here that they have a well-organized, within settings, you can get to the user guide. Within the user guide, they have video demos of how to do things, as well as textual explanations of how to do certain things within their application. And another question that I get frequently is, well, what about tutorials versus guided experience? It's the same thing. If you design your tutorial properly and follow all of those rules that we talked about, rules 1 through 5, you're going to end up with a guided experience. So it won't be text heavy, it won't be front loaded, it will be rewarding and relevant, and you're going to reinforce users' behaviors through use. And a really good example of that, an app that's come out fairly recently, is Facebook's Paper. So the first time that you go into Facebook Paper, they have a personalized onboarding experience, a lot like Beats Music. Once you get in there, they're like, hey, tell us what publications or areas of interest you have. And so you swipe through and you pick, I'm interested in science, I'm interested in art. And then it takes you straight into the application. And once you land in the application, you see screens like the ones I have here. And it tells you, okay, to start reading, swipe up the story. And in order for you to start reading a story, you have to actually swipe it up. So it's walking you through that interaction the first time and making sure you master it. Then once you've got a story up, it then shows you, okay, to move to the next story, swipe left. So it's got this very nice guided experience, and it only does it one time. It makes sure that you can master these gestures and that you understand how to use the application, and then it leaves you alone and lets you enjoy the paper. If you're interested in learning more about how the Facebook Paper app has done in usability testing, take a look at an article that is out by usertesting.com, and it's also linked in this presentation. And you can see how the results of the user testing show that this type of guided experience, which follows the 5 rules for tutorial design, is actually doing very, very well with users. All right, so we have reached the end of the talk. I would love if you folks want to follow me on Twitter and take a look at the new book. We've got a code up here for saving 50% off the ebook and 40% off the paper book. It's full color. It's quite nice. I just got a couple shipped to my house 2 weeks ago. I was excited to see them. The code is AUTHD, all caps, and you can use that at O'Reilly. And now I would like to open up the floor for more questions.
Excellent presentation, Theresa. Thank you so much. We have many more questions that have come in. Folks, we are at Q&A, as you heard. Please open your group chat widget. If it's not open, type in your question, send it in, and we'll take as many as we have time for. Back to you, Theresa.
Great. I see that we have a ton of questions come in. I was apparently in the wrong tab because I only had a couple. Okay. So we have one from Christopher. You mentioned it might be appropriate to offload marketing information to a website. Are there situations where you would consider offloading any part of your tutorial to resources external to the app? I don't know. I've not really thought about that before. I'm trying to think of an example of that. There's a really great business intelligence app called Roambi, R-O-A-M-B-I. I have not looked at their website recently. But a couple of years ago, when I wrote the first edition of the book, I noticed that their website showed a lot of the features of their product. And again, this is a productivity tool. It's fairly complex. It's for business intelligence. It's got a lot of charting and analytics. And their website showed a number of ways to use their tool and a lot of the features that were available within their tool that they did not necessarily put into their tutorial built into the mobile app. So yeah, I think that's totally possible. All right. We have another question from Dom. Okay, I can answer this one for you. So where in the development lifecycle of an application would you start to build the tutorial? Would it be part of the original design or only after you have a release candidate? I could have paid you to ask this question. If you try to add your tutorial after you've made your application, you will break pretty much every one of those rules. You'll end up using too much text. You'll front load it. Everything will be at the beginning, and it will not be integrated with your app. The time to design your tutorial is when you're creating the information architecture for your application. So when you first engage with your design team, or if you're a developer doing design, you should map out, take a piece of paper, pencil, sketch out what the first time experience is going to be like for your user, and that's when you start designing that guided experience and designing that tutorial and figure out, at what points will somebody need a little bit of additional help to fully use your application, and where could people get stuck, and how can you plan for that? Again, if you wait until the end of the design cycle, what you end up with is saying, okay, we've got these problems. How do we get around these problems? Okay, well, we'll just give people a lot of instructions at the beginning of what they should do to avoid any problems they might run into. And that's where we end up breaking all of the rules that are here for designing tutorials. Okay, I have another question first question from Kristen. Any thoughts on requiring users to log in with Facebook or other accounts prior to gaining access to the app? If so, how important do you feel it is to give a reason why users should opt into logging in? So this is a good question. I cover this pretty thoroughly in Chapter 2 on the new book about how to do sign-in, how to do sign-up, and when you should not even do sign-in and sign-up. So this depends on your business requirements. However, as a UX designer, I frequently encourage my clients who want to only present sign-in and sign-up options at the beginning to think, is that really necessary? Can we let users into the application and let them start consuming the content, and then at a certain point prompt them for sign-up? So an example of that is eBay. You can go to the eBay app and search all through eBay, look at all types of different items, but when you want to bid or save it, it prompts you to sign in or sign up. Realtor.com is another good example of that. Etsy, lots of retail sites follow this model of letting you get to the content, and then once you want to take some type of action on it, they prompt you to go ahead and register. So like I said, as a designer, if you're speaking with your product team or your business team, I encourage you to gently challenge them to think about, would it be okay and would it increase engagement with users if you let them get to the content first and then at certain points prompt them to become a member of the site. One of the things that drives that and that you may not be able to kind of talk your way through is if the business model is based around people paying for the content, obviously then you're not going to let them come in and consume all of the content up front for free, right? But if the business model is such that you're making money after they're already, say, like bidding on an item or contacting a realtor, then there's no reason to gate that content. You should go ahead and let them in and let them play with the application before prompting them. So I have another question here from Bruce. The examples shown so far are oriented towards smartphones. Your rules apply to tablets as well. Do I have any examples using tablets that have significantly more display area? I wish I did, but I'm just now starting on the tablet design pattern gallery, and so I don't have a lot of examples for tablets yet. I haven't reached that point, but I guess keep your eyes out, and there should be a tablet design pattern gallery coming out pretty soon. So Holly Smith has a question. What type of testing has been done around these patterns? Well, there's been a lot of testing done by different companies. The ones that I was able to share with you today involved Intuit's user testing as well as the testing that I was involved with for RetailMeNot. And there is a link in this deck for the user testing around the Facebook Paper app. So basically what I'm proposing is in the case of these two large organizations that were trying out the initial set of patterns, that they're basically dialogues, tours, video demos, and transparencies were ineffective for tutorials compared to creating a guided experience and using contextual tips within the application. So I would encourage you to, if you feel very, very strongly that a transparency is the best way to communicate information to your users the first time they download your app, I would encourage you to test that across some of these, or excuse me, against some of these other ideas like the contextual tips, and ensure that it's not just maybe the fad driving you forward to use a transparency, use a transparency pattern. I would like to say that if I had all the time and money in the world, I would test out each and every one of the patterns in the book so I could tell people, across the board, hey, you should use this one and not use that one. But instead, we have to rely upon anecdotes and examples from other companies to help inform us. Let's see. Christopher has a question. Have you experienced subsets of your users who prefer varying amounts of text, and how do you deal with user subsets generally? So, yeah, of course. There's people out there that I think there's what I learned in Marketing 101 is there's the first group of people who see something and they're like, yeah, I love it, I'm in. And then the second group of people are like, that was really interesting. Let me have a little bit more of information. And then you've got the third group of people that are like, I don't know, I really need to read up on this. So you definitely have that breakdown of types of folks needing different information to feel comfortable before they're using something. I do not feel that when you're creating your mobile tutorial that you should be designing for that third group of people that needs to have everything written out, in triplicate form, explaining all of the details. That's not really something that your tutorial should be addressing. Your tutorial is to help them learn how to best use your application, either the gestures that you've created or the navigation system, or how to use it most efficiently if it's a productivity tool. That might be a really good case that, like one of the first folks asked about, maybe that's something you could supplement either in a help guide or out on your website and make that available for those folks. I'm not sure what field you're designing for. That would probably have a big impact too. Maybe if you're designing, I don't know, applications for teachers to be using in the classroom, that there would be a supporting help guide to help, basically to provide all of those answers for them. But I wouldn't push all of that into your tutorial. Okay, and we have a question here from Rick Evans. As a designer, I'm rarely a subject matter expert, which is great. You're probably a better designer because you're not a subject matter expert if you know the right questions to ask. What practices do you recommend that a designer can use to collaborate with domain experts to birth an effective design? Well, this isn't really about mobile tutorials, but it is about designing any type of software. The way that we typically work, I have a team of about 12 other UX designers, very similar to myself. We have a very similar background, and we use similar processes with our clients. We start off by doing research and determining who the primary users are going to be, and then we ask our client to prioritize those different personas so we know which ones they're targeting most with their business strategy, and that in turn tells us who we're optimizing the design for. Then once we know those key personas that we're designing for, we start mapping out their workflows. And this is where you can take this, the workflows that you sketch out and start figuring out, well, what is that first-time experience going to be like in the mobile app? And that's where you start your tutorial design right there. And if we have, let's say we have 3 personas, we start working on that first one. We're like, okay, this guy needs to be able to accomplish this, this, and this. This is his story. So it's not, that a user needs to be able to print, or a user needs to be able to look something up on a map. It's very much a narrative about the persona we're designing for. So, if you're designing for something like Anydo, the story is not, a user needs to be able to enter a task and cross it off. It's a much larger story. We need to get into people's heads and determine, how do people handle not just list and task making, but what are the different personalities as far as like organizing and trying to get things done. Some people might do paper lists, some people don't do lists at all, maybe some people do note cards, and really get into the mind of these different types of people using your application. And then say we've got a person who is a list maker. That's our primary persona. It's somebody who's prone to making lists. Their story might be something like, Theresa typically needs to accomplish 100 to 200 tasks per week. She likes to approach them in priority order by due date. And she adds up to 10 to 20 new tasks a day, and she completes about 15 per day. Sometimes tasks pop back up. Sometimes, and her life would be made better if she was able to immediately turn incoming emails that she got, and push them straight onto her task list. That's the story that we would use to start crafting an application like Anydo or any other type of task list. At that point, you as the designer are collaborating tightly with the subject matter expert and using that research that you've brought to them to create these stories and start brainstorming. How can your mobile application or your software address pain points in your user's life? And that allows you to have those conversations with the SME that follow basically you can collect from them the information you need as a user experience designer, and they're able to share their experience working on that type of product with you, as well as their business objectives with you. And creating those stories together, those narratives for each persona, is a great way to collaborate. Then once you finally get to the wireframe stage, you're all on the same page. And you can alleviate those discussions of, well, maybe this button should be over here. What is this that you're showing here? It all ties back to those earlier workflows that you outlined and prioritized. And you're like, well, remember we agreed that we were going to design this workflow for this user. And that's, in a nutshell, how to effectively work with the SMEs. All right, I think I got to the bottom of the questions here.
Theresa, there are just a couple of more. Do you see them? Okay.
I see them. Here we have one from Gregory. Do you think the patterns, such as those provided in the Android style guide, provide a reasonable subset of good practices? Pretty much. There are a couple of the design patterns through Android that, once we implemented them according to their guidelines, did not test well in usability testing. So, for example, Android, if you're using the navigation drawer, which for those of you iOS folks, the little hamburger icon in the top left, that if you tap it, it slides the drawer open. In Android, that's called the navigation drawer, and it slides over the screen. Android recommends that the first time use, that's open by default, and that your user should have to explicitly close it. We found in testing that users do not like that. It's obstructing them seeing the app. So I think the Android style guide is a great start for you to design from. There's no reason to recreate the wheel. So work from that. If you go into testing and you find that things aren't working great, just tweak them from there. So I would recommend starting with either or any of the operating system style guides as your base, and then revising it based on user feedback. Let's see. I have a question here. What was the name of the Intuit presentation you mentioned at the start? It was provided by Lisa Griggs, and it is not a publicly available presentation. However, she was kind enough to write a case study for the book. So if you're interested in reading about the study, it is in the book, I believe chapter 7 on tutorials. You'll see it in there with all of the screenshots of the different designs that they tried and tested. And there's another question here. This one's a little too broad for me to answer, but I will address it in the blog. It's about key criteria for deciding whether to implement, design a native app versus a mobile website. So I will tackle that in the blog. And I think, am I getting all of them, Yas?
Yes.
All right. And I think we're right at the hour, too.
Perfect. All righty, folks. With that, as you heard, we are at the top of the hour, and for those of you that did have questions that did not get answered, we're going to be sending everything to Theresa, and she's going to be kind enough to write a blog post about it, and we'll let you know when it's ready, and you can go take a look at it. Theresa, thank you so much for spending your time with us today and for presenting a really outstanding webcast and for sharing all your knowledge and expertise with us.
Thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it.
Folks that attended our webcast today, we thank you for attending and hope you've benefited from it. And a big thank you to those of you that sent in your questions, because having your questions really adds so much to our events, and we do appreciate it. On the screen there, you can see Theresa's book. She's given you a code there to get a discount on it as a thank you for attending. As well, we have pushed out to you a link with a code. Theresa also has a great video out she did with Bill Scott, and it's all designing, and it's live and interactive, and you might want to check that out as well. We've got it for you today at a really, really great price, so I hope you do take a look at it. Take advantage of the discount for the book and the video. It will really help you with your day-to-day. Again, thank you, Theresa. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This will conclude our webcast. Goodbye, everyone.